Today, the 6th of Adar, is the Yahrtzeit of Rebbe Shemaryahu ben Rabbi Gurary, known as Rashag. The Rashag was the Rebbe's older brother-in-law, the older son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Just a few points about his life. He was born in 1898, I believe. Passed away in 1989. He was 91. And he was a Yid who gave his life to Chassidus. He knew a lot of Chassidus. They say he knew 300 Maimorim by heart in his youth when he learned in Lubavitch, in the yeshiva in Lubavitch. And he was someone who dedicated himself to the Frierdiker Rebbe and to the Rebbe. Just a few points. He was appointed by the Frierdiker Rebbe to help the Frierdiker Rebbe gather funds for the funding of matzah of the soldiers that were fighting in the war in Russia. In such other campaigns he was responsible for, and he was a statesman. He was tall and handsome, dressed well, spoke very well, and you can see in different pictures and articles how he took a lead role for the Frierdiker Rebbe in orchestrating all of those things. And this was at a time when, Stalin and communism was active, and it was very difficult, and people were being shot left and right, and the Chadorim and Mikvahs were all being closed down, and yet he took a full responsibility in going forward, and he had accomplished, and he had connections with the biggest people in the joint and in government, and he was a major player. This was in Russia, and then later in America in 1940, when he came together with the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1940, he was in charge of 14 yeshivas, talking about 770 and the Chabad yeshiva in Montreal, and the smaller yeshivas, day schools in Rochester and in Boston and in Philadelphia and in Buffalo, in Newark, in Chicago. He took a lead role and raised funds for them and organized the Bacharim 770, the American Bacharim, who were the first students of the yeshiva, to go out. Of course, everything with the blessing and direction of the Frierdiker Rebbe, but practically he implemented all that. And that was the foundation for many things. He also, as soon as he became, Rabbi Jacobson, who was the head of Chabad, the Chabad umbrella organization, and the Chaver Kadisha, the burial society organization. He was the head of it when the Rashag came to America in 1940. Rabbi Jacobson, who came in 1926, he gave it all over to him. Of course, he worked with him, and he did many things. And in fact, he was the actual person, Rabbi Jacobson was, who implemented everything during those years. But officially, the Rashag was his boss, and gladly he gave it over to the Rashag. Another thing that we hear about is that in 1950, 51, 52, when the previous Rebbe passed away, and there was a question, and by few, who should be the next Rebbe, and here's the older son-in-law. After a year to two, which didn't come from him, he was too smart. The Guraries are too smart and sophisticated to think that he's shy, to be a Rebbe. He was a very good person, and he had pedigree and connection, and the son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's all good and fine, but not Rebbe. But the family pushed him for whatever reason. I wrote a book called Rebbe and Rashag, and you could read all about this, and there are many documents and things if you want to know the history. And I encourage you to do that. But for now, he asked the Rebbe something. The Rebbe said he should go speak to the Frierdiker Rebbe at the oil. So he says, "What do you mean speak to the Frierdiker Rebbe at the oil? What does that mean?" And he says, "You talk to him and you'll get an answer." And he saw the seriousness of the Rebbe, how he really means it and believes it, and more so that's where he is. That's where he's at. That he's able to communicate with the Frierdiker Rebbe at the oil, and that broke him. If that's the case, he's talking to the Rebbe. This is the early years in 52, 53, those years. In 1970 or 71, there was the Tishrei, when the many Russian Chassidim came out of Russia and they came to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, spoke to them and gave them an honor by bringing them to the Bima, I think during Tekiyas, and close to him by Simchas Torah. The Rashag saw all this and the Fabrengens, and he was very impacted. And he wrote a letter to the Rebbe saying that he felt as though he was in Lubavitch again in his youth, in 1911, 12, 13, 14, whatever those years that he was there. He felt, and he lauded and admired, and he poured his heart out with such love to the Rebbe's leadership. Throughout the years, when he came to the Rebbe and asked the Rebbe, he didn't have enough money, for the fund to pay salaries and things like that. And the Rebbe would answer him, and he always reached out. I got to see him up close because in 1983, I was learning 770, and then Shabbos morning, I was sitting at the same table that he sat and learned together with a Chavrusa, Shalom Charatonov. It was a mashpia today. And I think they were learning Tafresh Nuntes, Tafresh Ayin. They were learning Maimonim, the Rebbe Rashag, discourses of the Rebbe Rashag. And Rabbi Charatonov, Shalom Charatonov, had a sefer, had a book, and he would read. And the Rashag would stop him sometimes and say, he was a stroke patient. I think he had a stroke in 1982. So his mind seemed to be sharp, but his mouth, his speech was mumbled. So you couldn't understand it, but I could see that he's correcting him. And he's correcting him not by looking inside the text, he's correcting him from memory. So it substantiated what I heard and what I told you earlier, that he knew many, many Maimorim by heart. Also Friday nights, he was up, and the Rebbe, they say, made a condition with him and the Rebbe that as part of the marriage to his daughters, to be up Friday night and learn. And he would come down to 770 to the Zalbis Medrash, and there he would learn, and the Bochurim sometimes would ask him questions and sing the Gunim for him. This was to keep him up, as he was getting older. They say that at some point he said to the Rebbe, he can't keep his eyes open. And the Rebbe said, what could I do? It's between you and our father-in-law. I didn't make the condition with you. Even at the time of the famous, or some would say notorious, situation of the Svarim, where his son, unfortunately, Rashag's son, stole some Svarim, and there was a whole Din Torah and Din Notzach and all of that. The Rashag sided with the Rebbe, and you have to understand that this is no simple matter. Here he has a wife, a daughter of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he has a son, an only son, and basically he sides with his brother-in-law over wife and son. Naturally, this left, in a way, it was very difficult for them, but he stood his ground because he saw the Rebbe as the emes, the Rebbe is the truth. So today on his Yahrtzeit, when we think about him, and in a way he's like forgotten, in Chabad, it's important to know that, he was an important player in the development of Chabad in America, in Russia for sure, but I'm saying even here in America. And like the Rebbe Chaim Bushka told one of the helpers that helped her in the house, told me that she said that my husband's greatest Chasid was Rabbi Gurary, meaning the Rashag. And I heard from Chassidim too, who were around in the 50s and 60s, who felt the same way, that his commitment, his bittul, his subservience to the wishes of the Rebbe, etc., was the greatest of the great, as we say. May his neshama have an aliyah, and may it come back together. Mashiach's coming. Amen. Immediately, Yerushalayim min HaKodesh. Amen. Amen.